His father died on a factory floor. His mother was dying in room 427. His little sister counted her breaths at night. 1, 2, 3, pause. Like they might run out. And the billionaire responsible for all of it just handed Theo a gold watch and laughed. Fix this, and you can keep it. Adrian Hale thought it was worthless. But inside that watch was something that would destroy him. Proof. Proof that his grandfather had built Hale Industries on dignity and fair wages. Proof that Adrian had betrayed everything his family stood for. Proof that Theo's father and 60 other workers had died so this man could maximize quarterly profits. Theo was 14 years old. He had $3.47 in his pocket. He worked in a market stall that leaked when it rained. But he had something Adrian Hale would never understand. Nothing left to lose. And when you have nothing left to lose, that's when you become dangerous. This is the story of how a poor kid with a broken watch took on a billion-dollar empire. How he exposed the truth that could have stayed buried forever. And how he made a billionaire beg for forgiveness. But the question is, was it worth what it cost him? Because what Theo gained came at a price that would haunt him forever. Let me take you back to where it started. The gold watch felt like a grenade in Theo Beckett's palm. It was 3 hours earlier, and the market hummed with its usual chaos, vendors shouting prices, the smell of fried plantains mixing with motor oil, the leak in the tin roof above his repair stall dripping steadily into a rusted bucket. The cameras were everywhere, smartphones raised, flashing lights, all of them pointed at the boy in the threadbare shirt standing behind a workbench of salvaged wood and corrugated metal. Adrian Hale's charity visit to the poor market was in full swing. The billionaire moved through the crowd like royalty. His silver-gray suit probably worth more than Theo's entire neighborhood. His publicist, a sharp-faced woman in crimson heels, kept checking her watch as if this whole event was just another item to tick off her schedule. We're committed to giving back to communities that built this city, Adrian was saying to a news camera, his smile perfectly calibrated for maximum sympathy. These hard-working people deserve our support. Hard-working people. As if he knew anything about hard work. As if he'd ever worked a day in his life. Theo's jaw clenched as he watched from his stall. His little sister Kate's medication cost $200 a week. His mother's hospital bed, the one she'd been lying in for 23 days now, cost more than that per day. And this man, whose company logo was stamped on half the buildings downtown, was performing compassion like a staged play. Then Adrian noticed Theo's stall. "What do you do here, son?" Adrian asked, that politician's voice dripping with manufactured warmth. "I fix things," Theo said flatly. "Watches, radios, phones. Things people break." A young entrepreneur. Adrian turned to his publicist. "This is exactly the kind of initiative we love to see." He pulled something from his pocket. A gold watch, glinting under the market's harsh fluorescent lights. "Tell you what, son. This watch is broken. If you can fix it, you can keep it. How's that for a deal?" The crowd murmured appreciatively. Cameras clicked. Adrian's smile widened. He held the watch out to Theo like he was handing a dog a treat. Theo took it. The metal was still warm from Adrian's wrist. Kids probably never even seen real gold before. Someone in Adrian's entourage muttered, just loud enough for Theo to hear. The crowd laughed. Adrian laughed. And Theo felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. "Should we get a photo?" the publicist asked. The contrast would be perfect for the campaign. They moved on then, the convoy of expensive suits and camera crews flowing through the market like a flood, leaving destruction disguised as charity in their wake. Within minutes, Adrian Hale had disappeared around the corner, already forgetting the poor boy he'd just humiliated on camera. But Theo wasn't looking at the departing crowd. He was looking at the watch. His hands trembled as he turned it over under the flickering bulb of his repair stall. Around him, the market noise faded to white static. Because there, etched in elegant script along the inner casing, were 6 words that stopped his heart. "Time is the only thing we can't rebuild." Theo's vision blurred. His breath caught in his throat. The same words his father had written on a torn piece of paper 3 years ago. The same words Theo had read over and over in the hospital waiting room while nurses rushed past and doctors spoke in hushed tones, and his mother's screams echoed down sterile hallways. The same words that had been in his father's pocket when they found him collapsed on the factory floor. David Beckett had died at Hale Industries. Line 7. Cardiac arrest after a 36-hour shift because Adrian Hale's company had laid off 60% of the factory workers to maximize efficiency. His father had worked himself to death building Adrian Hale's empire. And now, 3 years later, Adrian had just handed Theo a family heirloom like it was trash. Like it was worthless. Like everything Theo's father had built, sacrificed, and died for meant absolutely nothing. The market had gone quiet around him. Or maybe it hadn't. Maybe Theo had just stopped hearing anything except the watch's mechanical whisper and the memory of his father's voice reading those words aloud. Time is the only thing we can't rebuild, son. So don't waste it on regret. But his father had wasted it. Had wasted it on double shifts and triple shifts and working himself into the ground because Adrian Hale's company had decided that workers were expenses to be minimized, not human beings who deserve dignity. Theo's stall was a patchwork of salvaged materials, wedged between a woman selling fabric and an old man repairing shoes. On the workbench sat the tools his father had left him. A jeweler's loop, a set of precision screwdrivers, needle-nose pliers worn smooth from decades of use. Everything broken can be understood, his father used to say. You just have to be patient enough to see how the pieces fit. Theo set the watch down carefully, almost reverently. His hands had stopped shaking. No one was watching him anymore. The cameras had followed Adrian, hungry for the next photo opportunity, the next manufactured moment of compassion. Which meant no one saw him open the watch with the precision of a surgeon. No one saw the way his breath caught when he examined the movement inside, Swiss-made, probably a century old, the kind of craftsmanship that didn't exist anymore. No one saw him discover the second inscription, this one hidden beneath the main gear assembly. So small you'd need a magnifying glass to read it. For the workers who built the world. May we never forget. J.H. Jonathan Hale, Adrian's grandfather, the founder of Hale Industries. Theo's hands trembled again as he carefully researched the inscription using the library computer later that afternoon. Jonathan Hale had been a radical for his time, a factory worker who'd built an empire on the revolutionary idea that workers deserved fair wages, benefits, dignity. He'd created profit-sharing programs. He'd fought for safety regulations. He'd believed that a company was only as strong as the people who built it. Then he died, and his grandson had stripped that empire for parts, maximizing profits by minimizing the very people who'd built it. The watch was a manifesto, a promise that had been broken. Theo stood in his threadbare clothes in the market that evening, rain starting to drum against the tin roof, water pouring through the leak and splashing into the bucket with metallic precision. He wrapped the watch carefully in a clean cloth and placed it in his pocket. Adrian Hale thought this was worthless. Adrian Hale thought Theo was just another poor kid trying to scrape together a few dollars. Someone to be patted on the head and filmed for good publicity and forgotten before the SUV even left the market. But Adrian Hale had made one critical mistake. He'd given Theo something that couldn't be bought or sold or quantified in quarterly earnings reports. He'd given him proof. Proof that the man who'd destroyed his family, who'd turned his father into a statistic in a cost-cutting memo, who'd smiled for cameras while people lost everything, that man was about to learn what it felt like when the past came back to collect its debts. And for the first time since his father died, Theo smiled. Not from joy, not from hope, from something darker, something sharper, from the dangerous clarity that comes when you have nothing left to lose. Hello, my lovelies at Ducal Tales. Before we go any further into Theo's world, if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next in Theo's journey, you won't want to miss a single moment. Now, back to the moment everything changed. Because Theo knew exactly what he was going to do with this watch. He was going to take it to Adrian Hale's office. He was going to force that man to see what he'd destroyed. And he was going to make sure that every worker, every family, every person who'd lost someone to corporate greed knew the truth. That Adrian Hale's empire was built on broken promises and the bodies of people like Theo's father. The rain pounded harder. The bucket overflowed. Water spread across the concrete floor of his stall. But Theo stood there, dry-eyed and determined, holding a gold watch that weighed more than its metal, more than its mechanisms, more than any price tag could capture. But could a 14-year-old boy with nothing but broken tools and a broken heart really take on a billionaire who owned half the city, and win? And more importantly, even if he won, could he survive what that victory would cost? Theo's world had always been small, but it hadn't always been suffocating. Once, there had been Sunday mornings when his mother, Iris Beckett, would make pancakes that tasted like butter and hope. Once, his father, David, would take him to the workshop on weekends, teaching him the language of gears and springs, showing him how patience could resurrect even the most broken things. Once, his little sister Kate had been healthy enough to run, to laugh without coughing, to dream about becoming a veterinarian instead of just dreaming about her next breath. That was before the layoffs, before the factory closure, before everything collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. Now, 3 years later, Theo's world fit inside a market stall barely 6 feet wide. He lived in a room above a tailor's shop, one room for all 3 of them, with a hot plate that only worked half the time and a window that looked out onto an alley where stray dogs fought over garbage. Kate slept on a mattress on the floor, her inhaler always within reach, and she developed a habit of counting her breaths at night. 1, 2, 3, pause, like she was rationing something precious. His mother's hospital bills arrived like clockwork, each one more brutal than the last, each one pushing them deeper into a debt that felt like drowning in slow motion. Theo worked 7 days a week, 14 years old, and he hadn't been inside a school in 2 years. But he could fix almost anything. The market knew him as the kid who could resurrect the dead, at least when it came to broken electronics. Old women brought him their late husbands' watches. Shop owners brought him radios that had gone silent. Even the police brought him evidence room electronics that needed to work for trial. Theo? He looked up from the gold watch to find Kate standing at the edge of his stall. She was 11 but looked 8, all sharp angles and shadows under eyes too old for her face. Her school uniform was clean but faded, the collar she'd embroidered herself with tiny blue flowers, her small act of rebellion against their poverty. "You're supposed to be at school," Theo said, but his voice held no real reproach. "Mama called." Kate's voice was small, fragile as glass. "She wants to see us." Theo's stomach dropped. His mother only called when something had changed, and change in a hospital was rarely good news. The hospital was a 30-minute bus ride, but Theo and Kate walked. They couldn't afford the fare. Kate didn't complain, even when her breathing got raspy around mile 2. She just slipped her hand into Theo's and kept going, the way she always did, humming a song their father used to sing. She was the bravest person he knew. "Did you really meet Adrian Hale?" Kate asked as they crossed the bridge. Sarah at school said her mom saw it on the news. Theo's jaw tightened. "He was performing. What did he give you?" "Something he thought was worthless." Theo looked down at his sister. "But it's not." The hospital smelled like antiseptic and despair, that particular combination of bleach and fear that Theo had memorized in his lungs. 4th floor, room 427. His mother had been there so long the nurses knew them by name, knew to leave an extra chair, knew that these 2 kids visited every day without fail. Iris Beckett looked like a ghost of herself. The fluorescent lights made her skin appear translucent, blue veins visible beneath like a road map of suffering. Her hair, once thick and dark, lay thin against the pillow. But her eyes still burned with that fierce intelligence that had made her a union organizer, a troublemaker, a woman who'd stood in front of factory gates with a megaphone and demanded justice. "My babies," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Come here." Theo and Kate flanked her bed. Her hands felt cool, fragile, like holding something that might dissolve if he gripped too tight. The 4 lines snaked from her arm, pumping medication she couldn't afford, buying time they didn't have. "The doctor says I'm stable," Iris said, and Theo heard what she didn't say. Stable but not better. Stable but still dying. "That's good, Mama," Kate said, her voice cracking as she pressed her face against their mother's shoulder. "That's really good." Iris's gaze found Theo's. She'd always been able to read him. What happened today? You look different. How could he explain? How could he tell her that the man responsible for their father's death had handed him a watch like it was garbage? I met Adrian Hale, he said finally. His mother's hand tightened on his, her grip suddenly fierce despite her weakness. For a moment, her face transformed. Not with anger, but with something deeper. Recognition. The look of a warrior who'd fought the same battle and lost. Did he remember the strike? She asked. The protest. He didn't recognize me at all. To him, I was just another poor kid. Iris closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her temple, catching the harsh light. Your father would have wanted you to be careful, Theo. Men like Adrian Hale. They don't see people like us as real. I know, Theo said. But inside, something was hardening into resolve. But he gave me something, Mama. Something that might matter. Nothing matters to men like him, Iris whispered, exhaustion pulling her under. The rich stay rich. The poor stay poor. Theo watched his mother drift into sleep, her chest rising and falling with mechanical regularity. Kate curled up beside her, careful not to disturb the wires and tubes. And Theo thought about the watch, about the inscriptions, about Jonathan Hale's legacy betrayed. His mother was wrong. Things could change. Outside the hospital window, the city glittered like fool's gold. The Hale Industries tower rose above everything else, its glass facade reflecting the dying sun. Somewhere in that tower, Adrian Hale was probably having dinner that cost more than Theo's family spent in a month. Somewhere in that tower, decisions were being made that would destroy more lives. But Adrian Hale had made a mistake. And Theo was going to make sure he understood exactly what that watch was worth. Not in gold, but in truth. But how could a boy with nothing take down an empire built on the backs of people like his father? The call came 3 days later, at 6:47 in the morning. Theo was already awake, using the quiet hours before dawn to study the watch. What he'd discovered made his blood run cold. The watch was a 1924 Patek Philippe, custom-made, one of only 3 ever produced. It had belonged to Jonathan Hale, Adrian's grandfather. The man who'd built Hale Industries from nothing, who'd started as a factory worker himself. The man whose philosophy had been radical. A company is only as strong as the workers who build it. Jonathan Hale had paid fair wages, had provided benefits, had created profit-sharing programs. Then he died, and his grandson had stripped that empire for parts, maximizing profits by minimizing the very people who'd built it. The inscription, for the workers who built the world, was a manifesto. A promise that had been broken. Theo's phone buzzed. Unknown number. Is this Theo Beckett? A woman's voice, sharp and professional. Who's asking? Vanessa Montgomery, Mr. Hale's executive assistant. He'd like to meet with you this afternoon. He's reconsidered the watch's value and is prepared to offer you $10,000. $10,000. Enough to save his mother for months. Enough to change everything. But Theo felt the weight of the watch in his pocket, heavier than gold. What time? He heard himself ask. 3 o'clock. Hale Tower, executive floor. Come alone. By noon, Theo had made his decision, and it wasn't the one that would save his family. He dressed in his father's interview clothes, printed documents from the library about Jonathan Hale's progressive policies, and gathered proof of what Adrian's decisions had cost. Should he take the money and run? Save his mother? Walk away? Or force Adrian Hale to see what he'd destroyed? The doubt gnawed at him as he rode the bus downtown, watching the city transform from crumbling apartments to gleaming towers. What if he was wrong? What if this gamble cost them everything? But when he thought of his father's last words, "Don't waste time on regret," Theo knew. Some things mattered more than survival. Hale Tower's lobby was cathedral-sized, all marble and gold. The elevator rose 52 floors, and Theo watched the ground fall away, watched people become dots. This was how Adrian saw the world. From so high up that individual suffering was invisible. Vanessa Montgomery met him at the top, black suit, sharp eyes, firm handshake that tested him. The office was larger than Theo's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a desk the size of a boat, and standing at the window was Adrian Hale. He turned, and Theo saw him clearly for the first time. Not performing, just a man in his 50s, tired lines around his eyes, expensive watch on his wrist. "Theo," Adrian said, his voice quieter than expected, almost kind. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." Theo remained standing. "You want the watch back? $10,000 is a fair offer for. It belonged to your grandfather." Adrian stopped. The temperature dropped. "Jonathan Hale," Theo continued, "the founder, the man who actually cared about the people who worked for him." He pulled the watch from his pocket. "He made this for them, for the workers who built the world. Did you even know that?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "That watch is a family heirloom. It belongs to my family, not to the son of a man who died building your empire." Theo's voice cut like steel. "Not to the kid whose mother is dying because your company destroyed her health?" He spread documents across Adrian's desk. His father's obituary, hospital reports, employment records. David Beckett, factory worker, line 7. Worked there 19 years. Died 3 years ago during your restructuring. Cardiac arrest after a 36-hour shift because you laid off 60% of the workforce. Theo's hands trembled slightly, the only sign of his fear. "And my mother, Iris Beckett, plant manager, the one who organized the strike, the one you blacklisted. She's in room 427 at General Hospital right now, dying because we can't afford her treatment." Adrian stared at the documents like they were written in a language he'd forgotten. "I'm sorry," he said finally, and he sounded like he meant it. "I didn't. There are thousands of employees. I can't." "You can't care," Theo finished. "That's the problem. Your grandfather built this company on dignity, and you turned it into a machine that eats people alive." Theo placed the watch on the desk between them. "I'm not here for $10,000, he said. "I'm here to give you a choice." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "What choice?" "Keep pretending your grandfather's legacy means nothing. Keep treating people like numbers." Theo paused. "Or fix it. Actually fix what you've broken. Not with charity photo ops, but with real change. Fair wages, benefits, dignity." "That's not how business works," Adrian said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "It's how your grandfather's business worked. And he died one of the richest men in the city." Theo picked up the watch, held it out. "This belongs to you, your legacy. But every time you look at it, remember what it really means." Adrian took the watch slowly, his fingers trembling. "And if I do nothing?" he asked quietly. Theo smiled, that dark smile from the market, born from a place beyond hope or fear. "Then I make sure everyone knows. Every newspaper, every worker in every factory you own. I tell them about Jonathan Hale's watch, about the promises your family made and broke." He turned toward the door, then paused. "My mother has 3 months, maybe 6. If you want to do the right thing, Mr. Hale, I suggest you figure it out fast. Because I've got nothing left to lose." Theo walked out, leaving Adrian Hale standing in his empire of glass, holding a gold watch that suddenly weighed more than all his wealth combined. And as the elevator descended, Theo felt something unfamiliar bloom in his chest. Not hope, not yet, but possibility. The battle had begun. But had Theo just won his first victory, or painted a target on his back that courage alone couldn't protect him from? Nothing happened for 5 days. Theo went back to his stall, fixed broken radios and cracked phone screens, visited his mother every evening. He waited for retaliation. Lawyers with cease and desist letters, men in suits threatening him, something to prove he'd crossed a line the powerful didn't forgive. But there was only silence, until the morning a black town car pulled up to his stall. Theo's heart hammered as the rear window rolled down. But it wasn't Adrian Hale inside. It was a woman in her 70s, elegant in a way that spoke of old money and older grief. Her silver hair was pulled back, her eyes sharp despite their softness. "Theo Beckett?" she asked. Who's asking? My name is Catherine Hale. I'm Adrian's mother. She opened the car door. Would you walk with me? Please. Theo hesitated, then locked his stall and followed. They walked through the market in silence, Catherine moving slowly, her hand occasionally touching fabric at vendor stalls, pausing to smell spices, acting like she belonged in this world despite the obvious wealth in her bearing. My husband, Adrian's father, destroyed everything Jonathan built, Catherine said finally. After my father-in-law died, Robert gutted the company's values, cut wages, eliminated benefits, treated workers like machinery. I fought him. It's one of the reasons our marriage ended. She turned to Theo, and her eyes held a sorrow that felt ancient. When Robert died, I hoped Adrian would be different. I gave him Jonathan's watch as a reminder of who we were supposed to be. He threw it away, Theo said bitterly. No, Catherine's voice was firm. He carried it every day for 3 years. Then one morning, he left it on his desk and never touched it again. I think it reminded him of too much, of promises he couldn't keep and still run a profitable company. Or so he told himself. She stopped walking, faced him fully. What you did in his office, confronting him with the truth, it's been eating at him. He hasn't slept. He had Vanessa research your father, your mother, the factory closure. He knows now. Really knows. Good, Theo said, though his voice wavered. He should know. But knowing and acting are different things. Catherine's expression turned fierce. The board won't let him make changes easily. Shareholders demand profits. And there are people in that company who'd rather see Adrian gone than see worker protections restored. What are you saying? I'm saying you woke something in my son. Something I haven't seen since he was a boy who believed the world could be fair. Catherine reached into her purse, pulled out an envelope. This is information about the company's financial records, proof of how much profit they're making while claiming they can't afford better wages. I'm giving it to you because I think you're brave enough to use it. Theo stared at the envelope. Why would you betray your own son's company? I'm not betraying him. I'm helping him become the man his grandfather wanted him to be. She pressed the envelope into his hands. But Theo, you need to understand, once you start this, once you make this public, there will be consequences. For you, for your family. Are you prepared for that? Theo thought of his mother in room 427. Of Kate counting her breaths at night. Of his father's last shift. I've been living with consequences my whole life, he said. At least now they'll mean something. Catherine smiled sadly. You remind me of Jonathan. He had that same fire. She turned back toward her car. Be careful, Theo. Not everyone in that tower has a conscience worth waking. The envelope burned in Theo's pocket for 2 days before he opened it. Inside were financial statements, internal memos, emails from board meetings. Catherine was right. Hale Industries was posting record profits while claiming restructuring was necessary for survival. The numbers were damning. Cold. Proof that every sacrifice demanded from workers had been a lie wrapped in corporate language. But there was something else in the envelope. A photograph. Jonathan Hale standing with a group of factory workers, all of them smiling. And there, in the front row, a young man who looked eerily familiar. Theo flipped the photo over. Written in faded ink. David Thorne and the Line 7 crew, 1955. David Thorne. His father's father. His grandfather. Theo's hands shook. His family's connection to Hale Industries went back 3 generations. His grandfather had worked for Jonathan Hale, had been part of the company when it stood for something. Had probably helped build the very factory where Theo's father later died. The legacy wasn't just Adrian's. It was Theo's too. He called the number Catherine had included in the envelope. A journalist named Rachel Kim answered on the second ring. Ms. Kim? My name is Theo Beckett. Catherine Hale gave me your number. I have a story about Hale Industries, about broken promises and the workers who paid for them. There was a pause. I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can you meet me? They met in a coffee shop far from the market, far from Hale Tower. Rachel was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, with the wary look of someone who'd been burned by sources before. She listened as Theo laid out everything. His father's death, his mother's illness, the watch, the confrontation with Adrian, Catherine's documents. "This is explosive," Rachel said finally, flipping through the financial records. "But Theo, you're 14. This will put a spotlight on you that you can't imagine." "Are you sure?" "My mother is dying. My sister can barely breathe without medication we can barely afford. I'm already living in a spotlight I didn't ask for." Theo leaned forward. "The question is, are you willing to publish the truth, even if it means taking on one of the most powerful companies in the city?" Rachel smiled grimly. "I've been waiting for a story like this my whole career." They spent 3 hours going through everything. Rachel asked hard questions, verified facts, cross-referenced dates. She was thorough, relentless, exactly what Theo needed. "I'll need a week to write this," she said, "to make sure every detail is ironclad. They'll come after us with lawyers, so it has to be perfect." "A week," Theo agreed, though the thought of waiting felt like torture. He returned to his stall as the sun was setting, exhausted but electric with purpose. For the first time since his father died, Theo felt like he was doing something that mattered. Not just surviving, but fighting. Kate was waiting for him, sitting on the stool behind his workbench. "Mama wants to come home," she said softly. "The doctor said she can't afford to stay anymore. They're discharging her tomorrow." Theo's surge of purpose crashed into reality. Home meant their tiny room with no medical equipment, no nurses, no emergency support if something went wrong. "Did they say how long?" He couldn't finish the question. Kate's eyes filled with tears. "They said we should make her comfortable. That we should say the things we need to say." Theo pulled his sister into his arms, felt her small body shake with sobs she'd been holding back all day, and he realized with devastating clarity that while he'd been planning to take down an empire, he was about to lose the person who mattered most. His mother was coming home to die, and all the justice in the world wouldn't change that. How could Theo fight for a future when his present was crumbling? And could winning against Adrian Hale ever make up for what he was about to lose? They brought Iris home on a Wednesday morning. Theo and Kate had spent the night transforming their single room into something resembling comfort. They'd borrowed a proper bed from the tailor downstairs. Mr. Terry, who'd known them for years, insisted they keep it as long as they needed. Kate had picked wildflowers from the vacant lot 3 blocks over, arranged them in a mason jar on the windowsill. Theo had scrubbed every surface until his hands were raw. It still looked like what it was. A place where poor people went to die with dignity they couldn't afford. But when they wheeled Iris in, when she saw the flowers and the clean sheets and her children's faces trying so hard to be brave, she smiled. "My beautiful home," she whispered. "My beautiful babies." They settled her into bed, arranged her medications on the makeshift nightstand, positioned her so she could see out the window. The hospice nurse, a kind woman named Gloria who volunteered her time, showed them how to manage her pain, how to read the signs of distress, how to make the most of whatever time remained. "Days," Gloria said quietly to Theo while Iris slept. "Maybe a week if we're lucky." "I'm sorry." Theo nodded, throat too tight for words. That afternoon, while Kate sat with their mother reading aloud from a book of poems, Theo's phone rang. "Rachel Kim." "The story's ready," she said. "I'm publishing tomorrow morning. Front page. The Gold Watch and the Broken Promise. How Hale Industries abandoned its founder's legacy. Are you prepared?" Theo looked at his mother's sleeping face, at Kate's hand holding hers, at the tiny room that held everything he had left in the world. "Publish it," he said. The story went live at 6 a.m. By 7, Theo's phone was ringing nonstop. News outlets wanting interviews. Workers from Hale Industries calling to thank him. Union organizers asking if he'd speak at rallies. By 8, the story was trending on every social media platform. By 9, Adrian Hale's office released a statement. Theo read it on his cracked phone screen while sitting beside his mother's bed. Hale Industries is reviewing its labor policies in light of new information. "We are committed to honoring the values of our founder, Jonathan Hale, and ensuring all employees are treated with dignity and respect. A full audit of wages and benefits will be conducted immediately. It was vague, careful, but it was something. Theo? His mother's voice was barely audible. He leaned close. What's happening? You look different. I did something, Mama. Something you would have done. I told the truth about Hale Industries. About Dad. About what they took from us. Iris's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were pride. Did they listen? They're listening now. She reached up with trembling fingers, touched his face. Your father would be so proud. I'm so proud. Her breath rattled. But Theo, promise me something. Promise me you won't let this consume you. Don't let anger eat you alive the way it almost ate me. Make them better, yes. But don't forget to live. Don't forget to be young. Don't forget to laugh. Mama, promise me. I promise, Theo whispered, though he didn't know how to keep such a promise. That afternoon, another visitor arrived. Adrian Hale stood in the doorway of their tiny room, looking utterly out of place in his expensive suit. His face haggard like he hadn't slept in days. Kate gasped. Theo stood, placing himself between Adrian and his mother's bed. How dare you come here? Theo said, voice shaking with rage. I know. I have no right. Adrian's hands were empty, his shoulders slumped. But I needed to see, to understand. I've spent 3 days reading every file, every record about the factory closure. About your father. About the restructuring. He looked at Iris on the bed, at Kate clutching her mother's hand, at the poverty surrounding them. I did this, not personally, but the decisions I made, the policies I approved. I did this. Get out, Theo said. Wait. Iris's voice stopped them both. Let him speak. Adrian moved closer, slowly, like approaching something sacred. He knelt beside the bed, and the sight of this billionaire on his knees in their shabby room was so surreal Theo almost laughed. Mrs. Beckett, I remember you, Adrian said quietly. From the strike. You stood on top of a truck with a megaphone, telling the workers they deserved better. You scared the hell out of our lawyers. And you were right. About everything. Iris studied him with eyes that had seen too much suffering to be fooled by words. Why are you here? Because your son showed me my grandfather's watch and reminded me who I was supposed to be. Because I've been a coward, hiding behind profit margins and shareholder demands. Because... His voice broke. Because I've destroyed lives to build an empire, and I don't know how to live with that anymore. What are you going to do about it? Iris asked. Everything I can. I'm restructuring the entire company, raising wages by 30%, restoring benefits, creating a worker oversight board. It'll cost billions. The board might remove me. I might lose everything. Adrian looked at Theo. But at least I'll be able to look at my grandfather's watch again. Theo wanted to hate him, wanted to throw him out, to reject this convenient crisis of conscience. But he saw something in Adrian's eyes, genuine anguish, genuine shame, and remembered his mother's words about not letting anger consume him. It won't bring back my father, Theo said. It won't save my mother. I know. Adrian stood slowly. But maybe it'll save the next family. The next father who shouldn't have to die for someone else's profits. He pulled out an envelope. Everyone seemed to carry envelopes these days, and placed it on the bed. That's a bank draft. $5 million. For your mother's treatment, your sister's care, your future. It's not payment. It's not absolution. It's just what should have been done years ago. Theo stared at the envelope like it might explode. I don't want your money, he said, though his voice wavered because he was a 14-year-old boy whose mother was dying and whose sister couldn't breathe and who was so tired of being brave. Then use it to help other families, Adrian said. Use it to make sure no other kid has to fix broken radios in a market stall instead of going to school. Use it however you want. But please take it. Let me do this one thing right. Iris reached out, her hand trembling, and picked up the envelope. She held it against her chest, tears streaming down her face. For Kate, she whispered. For Theo's future. For every family we couldn't save during the strike. She looked at Adrian with an expression Theo had never seen on her face before. Not forgiveness, but something close. Thank you for finally seeing us. Adrian nodded, unable to speak. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Theo, when I said you could keep the watch if you fixed it, I was wrong. You didn't fix the watch. You fixed me. He met Theo's eyes. Thank you. After he left, the three of them sat in silence. $5 million in an envelope on the bed. The sound of Kate's breathing, steady but fragile. The light through the window turning gold as the sun set. We can get you treatment now, Mama, Kate said desperately. The best doctors. You can get better. But Iris just smiled sadly and shook her head. Some things can't be fixed, my love. But you, both of you, you're gonna have lives your father and I dreamed about. Education. Opportunities. Choices. She pulled them both close. That's better than any treatment. Theo pressed his face into his mother's shoulder and finally let himself cry. Not from sadness alone, but from the overwhelming complexity of winning and losing simultaneously, of achieving justice and still facing devastating loss. The watch had changed everything, but it couldn't stop time. My beautiful ducal family, I need to pause here. If this story is touching you, if you're invested in seeing Theo and Kate through to the end, please subscribe to our channel. Join this family we're building. A family that believes in stories that matter, stories that remind us what it means to be human. Now let's continue, because Theo's story isn't over yet. Iris Beckett died 3 days later, on a Saturday morning when the light through the window was soft and golden. She went peacefully, surrounded by her children, her hand in Theo's. Her last words were, "Take care of each other. Make it matter." Then she was gone, and Theo's world collapsed into a grief so vast he couldn't find the edges of it. The funeral was small. Just them, Mr. Terry the tailor, Gloria the hospice nurse, a few workers from the old factory who'd known David and Iris during the strike. But Catherine Hale came, and Rachel Kim, and to Theo's shock, Adrian Hale stood in the back, silent and respectful, his presence both a comfort and a reminder of everything that had led to this moment. Kate didn't cry during the service. She stood rigid beside Theo, holding his hand so tightly his fingers went numb. Her face blank like she'd shut down some essential part of herself to survive. It was after, when they returned to their empty room, when Kate saw their mother's bed still unmade, her medication still lined up on the nightstand. That was when she broke. She was getting better. Kate screamed, her voice raw and jagged. The doctors said she was stable. You said we could save her. You said... She collapsed, her small body racked with sobs that sounded like they were tearing her apart. Theo held her, but he had no words, no comfort, because she was right. He'd thought winning against Adrian, getting the money, exposing the truth, he'd thought it would be enough. That justice would somehow equal salvation. But his mother was dead, and all the money in the world couldn't change that. The $5 million sat in an account Theo couldn't bring himself to touch. Blood money, guilt money, money that came too late to matter. He stopped going to his market stall, stopped answering calls from journalists who wanted follow-up stories, stopped caring about Hale Industries' restructuring or Adrian's reforms or any of it. What was the point? He'd won the battle and lost everything. Kate returned to school, but she was different now, quieter. She stopped embroidering her uniforms, stopped humming their father's songs. She moved through the world like a ghost, and Theo didn't know how to reach her. 2 weeks after the funeral, Gloria the hospice nurse found Theo sitting in the market, staring at his closed stall. "You're drowning," she said bluntly. "Both of you are. And if you don't do something, you're going to pull each other under." "I don't know what to do," Theo admitted. "I thought I was fighting for something, but maybe I just made everything worse. Maybe if I'd taken Adrian's money that first day, if I'd stayed quiet, my mother would have had more time. Or maybe she would have died ashamed that her son learned to stay quiet when he should have spoken up," Gloria said firmly. "Your mother was proud of you, Theo. She died knowing you fought for something bigger than yourself. Don't dishonor that by giving up now." "I don't have anything left to fight for." Gloria gestured around the market, At the vendors, the workers, the families struggling just like his had. You have everything to fight for. You changed an entire company's policies. You inspired workers across the city to demand better. You proved that one person, one voice, can make a difference. She touched his shoulder. But first, you have to take care of your sister. She needs you. That night, Theo found Kate on the roof of their building, sitting with her legs dangling over the edge, staring at the city lights. "Don't," he said, his heart in his throat. "I'm not going to jump," Kate said quietly. "I'm just remembering. Dad used to bring me up here, before he got too tired, before everything fell apart. He'd point out the lights and make up stories about who lived in each one." Theo sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I'm sorry, Kate. I'm sorry I couldn't save them. I'm sorry I made you believe I could." "You did save them," Kate said, her voice thick with tears. "Not their bodies, but their fight, their belief that the world could be better. You made sure it mattered." She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the city lights like stars. "But Theo, we have to keep living. We have to be more than just the kids whose parents died. We have to be something. What do we be?" Kate leaned her head on his shoulder. "I don't know yet, but we figure it out together." They sat there for hours, two orphans on a rooftop, holding on to each other because it was all they had left. The next morning, Theo reopened his stall. He didn't do it because he felt better or because the grief had lessened. He did it because his mother's last words echoed in his mind. "Make it matter." The market welcomed him back with quiet nods and understanding smiles. People brought him simple repairs, paid him fairly, didn't ask questions about where he'd been. But on the third day, Vanessa Montgomery appeared at his stall. "Mr. Hale would like to see you," she said. "There's been a development." Theo almost refused. But something in Vanessa's expression, worry maybe or fear, made him agree. This time he brought Kate. Adrian's office felt different now, less imposing. Or maybe Theo was just too exhausted to be intimidated. Adrian looked worse than at the funeral, thinner, older, like the weight of his conscience was physically crushing him. "Thank you for coming," Adrian said, his eyes moving between Theo and Kate. "I need to tell you something. After the article published, after I announced the reforms, the board held an emergency meeting." He paused. "They voted to remove me as CEO. I'm out." Theo waited for satisfaction, for vindication. But all he felt was tired. "Why are you telling us this?" he asked. "Because they're reversing everything," Adrian said, his voice breaking. "The wage increases, the benefits restoration, all of it. They're saying it was my personal crusade, not sound business practice. They're going back to the old model." He looked devastated. "Everything we fought for, everything your mother died believing we'd achieved, they're erasing it." Kate's hand found Theo's. He felt her tremble. "So you gave up," Theo said flatly. "You tried for 5 minutes and gave up." "No." Adrian's voice turned hard. "I'm not giving up. I'm fighting back. But I can't do it alone." He pulled out documents, spread them across his desk. "I still own 30% of the company's shares. Catherine owns another 20. If we combine forces with the workers, if they organize, if they demand seats on the board, if they fight for their rights, we can take back control." "You want us to organize a rebellion," Theo said slowly. "I want us to finish what your parents started, what my grandfather believed in. I want to build the company Jonathan Hale dreamed of." Adrian looked directly at Theo. "But I need you. You're the voice the workers will listen to. You're the symbol of everything that's been wrong and everything that could be right." Theo looked at Kate, saw the question in her eyes, saw the fear, saw the hope she was trying so hard not to feel. Then he looked back at Adrian Hale, this broken billionaire asking a 14-year-old orphan to help him start a revolution. And Theo remembered his mother's fierce eyes, his father's calloused hands, the watch's inscription. For the workers who built the world. Was Theo strong enough to fight again? Could he risk everything one more time, not for revenge but for the future his parents had died believing in? The meeting was held in the basement of an old union hall that smelled like cigarettes and history. Theo stood at the front of the room, facing 300 workers from Hale Industries, men and women who'd survived the layoffs, who'd taken pay cuts to keep their jobs, who'd watched their friends and family struggle while the company posted record profits. They looked at him with a mixture of hope and skepticism. He was, after all, just a kid. "My name is Theo Beckett," he began, his voice steadier than he felt. "Some of you knew my father, David. Some of you knew my mother, Iris. They both worked for Hale Industries. They both believed that the company could be what it was supposed to be, a place where workers were valued, not exploited." He paused, swallowed hard. Kate sat in the front row, her eyes locked on his, giving him courage. "They were wrong," Theo continued. "At least they were wrong to trust that the company would change on its own. But they were right to believe it could change if we make it change." A murmur ran through the crowd. "The board has reversed all the reforms. They think we'll just accept it like we always have. They think we're powerless." Theo's voice grew stronger. "But we're not. Jonathan Hale built this company with workers just like you. You're the ones who make every product, fulfill every order, generate every dollar of profit. Without you, Hale Industries is just an empty building and a logo." "What are you suggesting?" a woman in the back called out. "A strike? We tried that before. They just hired replacements." "Not a strike," Theo said. "Something bigger. We're suggesting you become shareholders, owners, that you demand seats on the board, that you take back what's always been yours, the company your labor built." Adrian stepped forward then, and the room tensed. But he raised his hands, peaceable. "I know you have no reason to trust me," Adrian said. "I've made terrible decisions. I've prioritized profit over people. I became exactly what my grandfather would have hated." His voice cracked. "But this young man showed me something I'd forgotten, that we're all connected. That when I hurt you, I hurt myself. That the only way forward is together." He pulled out documents. "These are share transfer agreements. I'm giving 30% of my personal shares to a workers' trust. Combined with my mother's shares and the union's pension fund investments, workers will control 45% of the company. Not enough to override the board alone, but enough to force them to listen. Enough to make real change." The room erupted. Questions, accusations, disbelief. "Why now?" someone shouted. "Why should we believe you've changed?" "Because I can't live with who I was anymore," Adrian said simply. "And because if we don't do this, the cycle continues. More families destroyed. More lives sacrificed for profit margins. More kids like Theo and Kate losing their parents to a system that doesn't value human life." Theo felt tears on his cheeks but didn't wipe them away. "My parents are gone," he said into the noise. "I can't bring them back. But I can make sure they didn't die for nothing. I can make sure your children don't have to stand where I'm standing in 10 years, asking why nobody fought for something better." The room went quiet. "Who's with us?" Theo asked. One hand went up, then another, then 10, 20, 50. Within minutes, the entire room was standing, hands raised, faces set with determination. They were with him. Over the next 2 weeks, the revolution built momentum. Rachel Kim published daily updates. Workers from other companies reached out, inspired. The union organized rapidly, leveraging their pension funds' shares. Catherine Hale used her social connections to pressure other board members. And Theo became the face of it all. He gave interviews on rooftops and in factory break rooms. He spoke at rallies and on podcasts. News outlets called him the boy who changed everything, which felt ridiculous because he was just trying to keep his promise to his mother. But something was shifting. He could feel it. Kate helped design flyers and manage social media. She'd come alive again, her fierce intelligence finding purpose. She interviewed workers, collected their stories, made sure every voice was heard. "You're good at this?" Theo told her one evening as they worked side by side in their room. No longer empty and sad, but filled with papers and plans and possibility. "So are you," Kate said. "Dad and Mama would be so proud." The night before the emergency shareholder meeting, Theo couldn't sleep. He stood on the roof again, this time holding the gold watch. Adrian had given it back to him permanently, saying it belonged with someone who understood its meaning. "I hope we're doing the right thing," he whispered to the city, to his parents, to whatever force in the universe might be listening. "We are." Theo turned to find Adrian Hale climbing onto the roof, moving carefully in her elegant shoes. "How did you know I was here?" he asked. "I've been 14 and scared before," she said with a sad smile. "Rooftops are good for that." She stood beside him, looking out at the city. "Tomorrow changes everything, you know? Win or lose, nothing will ever be the same." "I know. My grandson, Jonathan's great-grandson. He's 7 years old. His name is Jonathan, after his great-great-grandfather." Catherine's eyes were bright with tears. "Tomorrow, I want to be able to tell him that our family remembered who we were supposed to be. That when we lost our way, a brave boy helped us find it again." "What if we lose?" Theo asked quietly. "Then we'll have tried. And trying matters more than you know." She touched the watch in his hands. "My father-in-law told me once that time is the only thing we can't rebuild. But he also said that what we do with our time, that's what makes us human. You're doing something beautiful with yours, Theo." She left him there with the watch and the stars and the knowledge that tomorrow, everything would change. When Theo finally returned to their room, Kate was awake. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. She shook her head. "Theo, whatever happens tomorrow, thank you. For fighting. For not giving up. For being the big brother who taught me that we can make the world better." "We," Theo corrected, pulling her into a hug. "We make the world better. Together." They fell asleep that way, two orphans holding on to each other, holding on to hope, holding on to the belief that morning would bring justice. The battle for Hale Industries' soul was about to reach its climax. But did Theo have what it took to finish what his parents started? And could he do it without losing himself in the process? The shareholder meeting was held in the grand ballroom of the Heritage Hotel, a space designed to intimidate with its crystal chandeliers and marble floors. Theo wore his father's suit, altered to fit him now. Kate wore a dress Catherine had bought her, professional and dignified. They walked in together, heads high, though Theo's heart hammered against his ribs. The room was packed. Current board members sat at a long table at the front, their faces carefully neutral. Adrian and Catherine sat with the workers' representatives. Press lined the back walls, cameras ready. And filling the seats were shareholders, institutional investors, individual holders, and hundreds of workers who'd pooled their shares. The current board chairman, a man named Robert Sterling with silver hair and cold eyes, called the meeting to order. "We're here to address several proposals regarding company restructuring," Sterling said, his tone making clear what he thought of these proposals. "First, Mr. Adrian Hale's motion to restore wage increases and benefits packages." Adrian stood. "The data is clear. When we invested in our workers 3 weeks ago, productivity increased 12%. Turnover dropped to historic lows. Quality improved. These aren't just moral imperatives. They're sound business practices that my grandfather proved successful decades ago." "They're also expensive," countered Sarah Terry, the CFO. "Our profit margins would decrease by 18%. Shareholders expect returns, not charity." "I'm a shareholder," called a voice from the crowd. A woman stood, late 50s, wearing a factory uniform. "Mary Richardson, line 7. I've worked for this company for 32 years. I don't need higher returns. I need to afford my medication and maybe retire someday with dignity." Another worker stood. Then another. Voices filling the space, sharing stories of struggle, of choosing between groceries and medical care, of watching their children struggle because poverty was inherited like eye color. Sterling banged his gavel. "This isn't a town hall. Please, let them speak." Adrian Hale's voice cut through the room like a blade. She stood, regal and commanding. "These are the people who built this company. The least you can do is listen." For 20 minutes, workers spoke. And Theo watched the faces of the board members, saw some of them shift uncomfortably, saw cracks forming in their united front. Finally, Sterling called for order. "Very moving, but sentiments don't pay dividends. Let's vote on." "Wait," Theo stood. The room went silent. Sterling's eyes narrowed. This is a shareholder meeting, young man. Unless you hold shares. He does, Adrian said. I transferred 1% of my holdings to Theo Beckett this morning. He has the right to speak. Theo walked to the front, his legs shaking but his voice steady. He pulled the gold watch from his pocket and held it up so everyone could see. This watch belonged to Jonathan Hale, the founder of this company. The man who believed that workers weren't expenses to be minimized but human beings who deserved dignity. Theo's voice grew stronger. He built an empire on that belief. And when he died, that belief died with him. He turned to face the board directly. My father died because this company forgot what it was supposed to be. My mother died believing that maybe, just maybe, it could remember. And I'm standing here because I refuse to let their deaths mean nothing. Theo placed the watch on the table in front of Sterling. This is what you're really voting on today. Not profit margins or shareholder returns. You're voting on whether Jonathan Hale's legacy, a legacy of dignity and fairness and valuing human life, you're voting on whether that legacy dies completely or whether we resurrect it. He looked out at the crowd. My family lost everything to this company's greed. But we're not the only ones. Every person in this room has a story of loss, of struggle, of watching people they love suffer because profits mattered more than people. That's enough, Sterling said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, Theo said firmly. It's not nearly enough, but it's a start. He turned back to the board. Vote however your conscience allows. But know that the world is watching. History is watching. And whatever you decide today will define who you are forever. He returned to his seat, his hands shaking, Kate squeezing his arm in support. Sterling called for the vote. All in favor of restoring the wage increases and benefits packages? Hands rose. Adrian, Catherine, the workers' representatives. Then, slowly, 2 board members raised their hands. Then another. It wasn't enough. 6-5 against. Sterling smiled coldly. Motion fails. Next. I'd like to call for a vote of no confidence in the current board, Catherine interrupted, and a motion to restructure the board to include worker representation. That's not on the agenda. I'm making it the agenda. I still own 20% of this company. Robert, I have that right. Chaos erupted. Lawyers conferred frantically. Press cameras flashed. Workers chanted. Sterling banged his gavel uselessly. Then the doors at the back of the room opened. A man in his 80s walked in slowly, leaning on a cane. The room went silent, because everyone recognized him. Senator Patrick Morrison, legendary labor rights advocate, a man whose endorsements could make or break careers. I apologize for my late arrival, Morrison said, his voice carrying despite his age. I was finishing a call with the SEC about some very interesting financial irregularities at Hale Industries. He looked directly at Sterling. Funny thing about cooking the books to inflate profit margins. It's illegal. Sterling's face went white. I have documentation, Morrison continued, pulling out a folder, showing that the CFO and 3 board members have been systematically underreporting labor costs and overvaluing assets to make the company appear more profitable than it is. The SEC will be launching a full investigation. Sarah Terry, the CFO, stood abruptly. That's absurd. Those allegations are supported by whistleblower testimony from your own accounting department, Morrison said calmly. Testimony that came to light because a certain journalist named Rachel Kim started asking the right questions after a 14-year-old boy exposed this company's true nature. He turned to Theo. Young man, you started something extraordinary. You reminded us that courage isn't about being powerful. It's about being willing to stand up when it would be easier to stay silent. Morrison addressed the room. I'm here to offer the workers of Hale Industries the full support of the Labor Rights Coalition. We will help you organize, help you fight, help you take back what's rightfully yours. And we'll make sure every company in this city knows that the era of treating workers as disposable is over. The room erupted in applause. Sterling slumped in his chair, defeated. Sarah Terry gathered her papers and left. The board members who'd been implicated followed. When order was restored, the vote was called again. This time, with new interim board members appointed, the motion passed. Wages restored. Benefits restored. Worker representation established. They'd won. Theo felt Kate's arms around him, felt tears streaming down his face. Around them, workers were cheering, hugging, crying. Adrian met Theo's eyes across the room and nodded. A gesture of respect, of gratitude, of acknowledgement that they'd done something that mattered. Catherine approached them, her own eyes wet. "Your parents would be so proud. We couldn't have done it without you," Theo said. "No," Catherine corrected gently. "You absolutely could have. You just would have had to fight harder." She smiled. "But I'm glad I got to help. Glad I got to see my family's legacy honored again." As the room slowly emptied, as press swarmed for interviews, Theo found himself standing alone for a moment at the window, looking out at the city. "We did it, Dad," he whispered. "We did it, Mama. We made it matter." The gold watch ticked softly in his pocket. Time is the only thing we can't rebuild. But what we do with our time, that's everything. Justice had been served. But what would Theo and Kate build with the future their parents had died to give them? 6 months later, the Beckett Foundation opened its doors in a renovated building 3 blocks from the old market. The sign above the entrance read, "For the workers who built the world." Inside, there were tutoring rooms where kids whose parents worked long hours could get help with homework. A legal clinic where workers could get advice on their rights. A community space where families could gather. And in the back, a small museum dedicated to labor history, with Jonathan Hale's gold watch displayed in a glass case. A reminder of promises kept and promises broken and promises remade. Theo stood in the main room, watching Kate teach a group of younger kids how to code. She'd discovered a passion for technology, for teaching, for showing other kids that poverty didn't define their potential. At 12 years old, she was already planning to be an engineer, already dreaming bigger than their parents could have imagined. "Mr. Beckett?" Theo turned. He still wasn't used to being called that, to find a young woman with a baby on her hip. "I just wanted to thank you. My husband works at Hale Industries. The benefits you fought for, they covered my daughter's surgery. She's going to be okay because of what you did." Theo swallowed hard. "I'm glad. That's why we're here." She squeezed his hand and moved on, and Theo felt that familiar ache. Joy and grief tangled together, pride and loss, the bittersweet knowledge that his parents should be here to see this. "They are seeing it," Catherine said, appearing beside him. She came by weekly, volunteering, staying connected. "Just not the way we wish they could." Adrian arrived next, no longer in expensive suits but in casual clothes that made him look almost normal. He'd stepped down from Hale Industries entirely, taken a position as a workers' advocate, spent his days fighting for the reforms he'd once opposed. His fancy apartment had been sold. He lived modestly now, using his wealth to fund organizations like the Beckett Foundation. "Big day tomorrow," Adrian said. "You nervous?" Tomorrow, Theo would testify before Congress about labor reform legislation. At 15, he'd become an unlikely spokesperson for workers' rights, traveling the country, sharing his story, inspiring change. "Terrified," Theo admitted. "But I think that's normal." "It is," Adrian agreed. "But Theo, you should know you've already changed more than you realize. 23 companies have reformed their labor practices because of the attention your story brought. Thousands of workers have better lives because you refused to stay silent." "We," Theo corrected, "because we refused to stay silent." That evening, after the foundation closed, Theo and Kate walked to the cemetery where their parents were buried. They did this once a week, bringing flowers, telling stories, keeping their memories alive. "I got an A on my science project," Kate told their parents' headstones. And Theo's speech at the university made the news. "We're doing okay. Some days are hard. But we're okay." Theo knelt, touching his father's name carved in stone. "I kept my promise, Dad. I didn't waste time on regret. I made it count." He moved to his mother's stone. "And Mama, I'm trying to remember to laugh, to be young." Kate helps with that. As they sat there in the fading light, Kate leaned against Theo's shoulder. "Do you think they knew?" she asked quietly. "That what they fought for would lead to all this?" "I think they hoped," Theo said. "And hope is enough sometimes. It's what keeps us fighting when everything else says to give up." They walked home through the city they'd helped change, past the factory where their father had died, now reopened with fair wages and worker protections, past Hale Tower, where workers served on the board and had a voice, past the market where Theo's stall still stood, now run by a young man Theo had trained, continuing the cycle of resilience and skill. Their apartment was bigger now, 3 bedrooms in a safe neighborhood, paid for with money from the settlement. But they'd kept it simple, kept it real, never forgetting where they came from or why they fought. That night, Theo sat at his desk, the gold watch beside him, and wrote in the journal he'd been keeping. A record of everything that had happened, everything he'd learned, everything he wanted to remember. "Time is the only thing we can't rebuild," he wrote. "But what we build with our time, that's our legacy. That's what we leave behind when we're gone. Dad, you built me, taught me to fix broken things, to be patient, to understand how pieces fit together. Mama, you built my courage, taught me to speak up, to fight for what's right, to never accept that the world can't change. Together, you built something that couldn't be destroyed by poverty or loss or grief. You built hope. And Kate and I, we're going to keep building on that foundation for the rest of our lives." He closed the journal, picked up the watch and wound it carefully. It still kept perfect time, just like Jonathan Hale had designed it to do a century ago. Some things Theo had learned were built to last. Not because they were expensive or powerful or impressive, but because they were built with care, with love, with the understanding that what we create matters beyond our own lifetimes. The watch ticked softly in his hands. Tick, 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 each second a heartbeat, each moment a choice. And Theo chose, every single day, to make his parents proud, to honor their sacrifice, to build a world where no other kid would have to stand in a market stall, desperate and alone, fighting battles that should never have been theirs to fight. Kate appeared in his doorway, rubbing her eyes. "Can't sleep. Just thinking," Theo said. "Come here." She curled up next to him, and he showed her the watch, showed her the inscriptions, told her again the story of how a billionaire's carelessness had sparked a revolution. "We're going to be okay, aren't we?" Kate asked. "We're going to be better than okay," Theo promised. "We're going to be extraordinary. Not because of money or fame or anything like that, but because we'll never forget who we are or where we came from. Because we'll keep fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. Because we'll remember that time is precious and we won't waste a single second of it." Kate smiled, her eyes drifting closed. "Dad and Mama would like that." "Yeah," Theo whispered, holding his sister close, holding the watch that had changed everything, holding on to hope like the precious thing it was. "They would." Outside, the city hummed with life. Millions of stories, millions of struggles, millions of people just trying to survive another day. But now, in small ways and large, things were changing. Workers were organizing. Companies were reforming. Voices that had been silent were speaking up. And somewhere in that vast tapestry of human struggle and triumph, 2 kids who'd lost everything were building something beautiful from the ruins. The gold watch kept ticking. Time moved forward as it always did. But this time, for the first time in a long time, the future felt bright. My beautiful ducal family, we've reached the end of Theo and Kate's journey together. If this story touched your heart, if you felt every moment of loss and triumph and hope, please tell me in the comments. What would you have done in Theo's place? What does courage mean to you? And if you're not already part of our ducal family, please subscribe. Join us as we continue to share stories that matter, stories that remind us of our shared humanity, stories that inspire us to be braver, kinder, and more determined to make the world better.